I'm Isaac with 120 Water.
And I'm Chelsea with Rogue Water, and we're excited to welcome you to the Make Water Work and Catalyst Collab.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Make Water Work podcast. This is the Make Water Work and Catalyst Collab. This is a collaboration with Rogue Water Lab, who puts on an experience called Catalyst, and this year it's in sunny San Diego. And it really is an opportunity to be in a room with like-minded folks who are all pursuing improving themselves. And so Chelsea and Greg Wukash do a great job of bringing in experts, particularly from places that aren't necessarily in the water industry. And that's something that's been valuable. And so Chelsea, I love being able to start all these podcasts by celebrating what you create at Catalyst and the experience that you give all of us. And today, tell us about who our guest is.
Yeah, well, thank you, Isaac. I appreciate that. Super excited to tell you about our guest today. I just recently became acquainted with her, but Dr. Shalini Vajjhala is the executive director of Pre-Collective. That's a group of public service-minded experts on infrastructure and project development, and they help communities make the most of transformational infrastructure opportunities, which is so relevant to our water sector. And you know me, I never read people's bios, but hers is so impressive. I've got to tell you just a little bit more before we say hi. She has also founded a design and finance firm that works on public-private partnerships, and she co-founded an online collaborations platform for local government. She has held senior roles at the U.S. EPA, at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She has a PhD in engineering and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University. So Dr. Vajjhala just has more than 2 decades of experience designing, funding, financing community-centered climate infrastructure work. And so what a relevant expertise to bring and expose to our Catalyst guests. So really excited about that and really excited to have you on the podcast today, Shalini. Welcome.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Thanks, Isaac. Water people are my favorite people. I'm so glad to be here.
It's amazing. And it's so funny that we were saying earlier, this has been a long time introduction where Shalini and I have not really met before. But ironically, when I started at 120 Water in 2018, one of my first calls in my first 30 days was to someone who worked at the Atlas, the project that she started, and was a meaningful place for me to learn, because my biggest question was, okay, so we have a solution and thing, but the challenge is going to be procurement. How do people in state and local government solve procurement challenges? And I found the Atlas, and I found Elle and Ellery, and connected with them. And so, this is very exciting. So that was how I found the Atlas. But I love starting our podcast with, how did water find you? Why are we your favorite people?
Are you my favorite? I think you guys are my favorite people because water touches everything. And so I walked into the field somewhat sideways, and I think it's been a real privilege to be able to find multiple doorways into working with folks in the water sector. So I would say the first really deep anchor that I got in the field and in the sector was actually when I was in architecture school. I had a chance to spend 6 months, a semester abroad, working in mega cities. And so this was a program. I was the only architect, and it was a mix of a lot of other people who were coming at issues affecting mega cities. And one of the biggest ones was not enough water or too much water in places around. So I spent time in Cairo and in Mumbai, India, and in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And in Rio, there were communities that would slide off the hillsides, these informal communities with regular rains, and rebuild. And there were challenges with water infrastructure. That was the basic fundamental thing. In India, it was watching people walk, carrying water constantly. In Egypt, it was amazing how many people chose to live in places where they would walk for their water, but have access to other amenities and be relocated by railway expansions and other things. So it was this deep underlying thing that was constant in all the different ways that I was seeing issues pop up. And that has remained true in 20 years of climate resilience work.
I love hearing that because, in the water sector, we're all often in rooms just by ourselves with just water people, and really lamenting on just the crucial importance of water, the value of water, its role in everything. And often, feel like we're not in these other rooms and other places. And it was, through architecture study that you on your own kind of came to this realization of water's role in things. I also find, maybe that's part of your story to this next question, but your kind of like background and expertise at the intersection of infrastructure and climate resilience and community is unique. What pulled you towards that?
It's funny. My career looks so coherent in hindsight, and it never really did going forward. It was always trying to follow interesting problems. So it does go back to that early work in Rio. And what was fascinating is that work followed me all the way into my time at EPA, where I was in the international and tribal affairs side of the house, but almost everything touched water. And so the things that pulled me toward this, the work that brings all the fields together, was really, I started asking some very basic questions in working across those big cities because the problems were so similar and the contexts felt wildly different on the surface. But when you dug down, it was really about, what do people need to have good lives? Why are they making the choices they're making? So I started collecting hand-drawn maps, and it was a way of getting around language barriers. And I wanted to understand, one of the very first neighborhoods I was in, there were people who their houses were being torn down to expand a railway line. And they were gone one day and they were back the next. And I started asking questions with very limited language access to a lot of people. And what became clear was these people had been offered homes way, way, way on the edge of the city. But they lost access to all the things that made it possible for them to build a better life.
Yeah.
That sense of hope. And so they just kept coming back to these very precarious and informal communities with limited infrastructure access. And so I started collecting these maps that now, in hindsight, connect all these issues that you just listed off, Chelsea. But at the time, I was asking questions like, where do you go every day? What's most important to you? Why are you here, like in this place?
Yeah.
And what started coming up was a set of things that turned into graduate research in engineering and policy that turned into questions like, okay, when you say not in my backyard, how big's your backyard? How close would you be willing to live to a water treatment plant or a power line? How close is too close? How far away is I'm okay? That's not my problem. And what's amazing is those questions carried into work with the World Bank in Southern Africa. It became a way of building up a set of tools almost to get to what really matters to people and then design infrastructure in service of that, rather than designing infrastructure based on what we always had. And so one of the great delights in my career was being able to go back to Rio as an official at EPA and recognize those hillside communities ahead of the 2016 Olympics. And what we were able to do in collaboration with the Brazilian government is find creative ways to help water infrastructure get built. And one of the ways we did that is we said, well, instead of trying to build water infrastructure, what if we called water infrastructure landslide protection? for these communities. They're sliding off into tourist districts on a regular basis. And I think the entry point in this unusual way opened up the space to ask surprising questions and find new answers at the end of them. And so it was really exciting. The city of Rio was able to support a lot of water infrastructure development in favelas ahead of the Olympics by combining it with civil defense authority works on resilience.
Yeah.
And that's really where like these things started coming together for me.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah,
It's a wild
love
ride.
so
Who
much
gets to
about
respond
it.
first, Chelsea? I don't
know. I was going to jump in and force you to let me respond first. Go for it, Isaac.
No, you. I was like, I'm like, we both have so much that we could react to in that.
No,
but
it's
you
just
go
so
for
good because it relates so much. We're going to have you at Catalyst this year, and unbeknownst to you, it relates like what some other people are going to tie into and talk to too. And I just think the whole curation of that is going to be awesome for attendees. But the other thing I hear in there is, I'm constantly thinking about utilities. Rogue Water works with utilities a ton, and a lot of times when they hear from the community, not in my backyard, or they hear we're opposed to this, they being utility people, get scared and kind of stop or defensive and, oh man, what a bad, angry customer. Without, just because they don't have those same tools and skill sets and questions that you kind of developed and were equipped with to say, what do you really mean by that? And listen, right? And it's not so scary. And there are ways to get to common solutions if we actually just listen to what everyone means and wants. But I do like to recognize that that's a scary thing to do. And I know the water sector, we're not equipped to do it yet. So
yeah. I was thinking about how the repositioning and the reframing of we need to do water infrastructure. I think a lot of times, even the way that we label funding at the federal level, it's like, well, what's going to water? And so it's like sometimes where water's getting underfunded, which is absolutely true. And there are other things that are important to communities that will require restructuring of water infrastructure. So where's that overlay where we can say, okay, this project is really important. It's not directly water infrastructure, but it will allow for water infrastructure upgrades. But it does require a bit of thinking a bit more abstractly about what it is and not as linearly.
And it's a tricky dance, right? So Chelsea, one of the things I think is scariest is when you are supposed to be an expert in something, when you are responsible for something, money or an outcome. A lot of times you're holding yourself to a different standard and trying to find ways that are still really holding accountability for that role and that expertise, but creating that space for listening, I think that's where the magic is. And so my experience on this is no one wants a water main. They want clean water. No one needs a highway. They need to get safely to school and the people they love. And so oftentimes we leap too quickly to the answer or the obligation of what we think we're supposed to deliver. And I think by just slowing down enough at the beginning, not feeling that pressure and urgency to say there might be a wider set of solutions here. What is the actual outcome I'm trying to achieve? It's making sure that these folks are safe and have access to clean water. And just by sticking that word safe in there, it opened up 10 times the amount of money. If, as a water professional, if you can tap into, another budget, that's magic. And it's oftentimes right there within your skill set. And so my other favorite example is the city of Hoboken, which had amazing non-water people who did water. And this was one of our earliest projects when I started Refocus, the predecessor to Pre-Collective. And we got to work with the city after Hurricane Sandy. So way too much water. But they basically came at a problem and said, we need flood resilience. And we were able to do that 3-week pause and say, what else do you need?
Mm.
And instead of getting pumps, which would have been the immediate answer when you look in your wallet and see what can you afford? I can afford a $5 million pump, or I can
Yep.
afford this upgrade or this sewer separation. What we were able to say is, can we also get you parking and parks and other ways to pay for this? So if your cars are floating down your streets in an event, why not have parking pay for your flood protection when it's dry out? And
Yeah.
it's that, but asking the question that way
Yeah.
opened up the like, well, why can't we have a bathtub? Turned out the parking garage wasn't the bathtub, but the conversation about it opened the door to this crown jewel of an asset that Hoboken was able to
Mm.
build. And they went from scraping to find $5 million to financing $100 million crown jewel of a park
Wow.
now.
Whoa.
So that's the difference, right? But it has to happen right at that early stage. Otherwise, you've already locked into now, how do I get a better pump? And that's the wrong question.
Oh, yeah. 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 That like taps into like the humanity side of like that, allowing for sometimes the uncomfortable silence when there's any problem, whether that's interpersonal or anything. It's like, I just want to resolve this so everyone goes home. Can we just be done with this this is a conflict and we have to solve a problem. I want to jump over here, but everything that's lost in that space in between is amazing opportunity. Yeah, I'm gonna be chewing on that for a hot second.
I also just think, that community engagement, trust building work, you that example, I think, was a great way to show ROI. But a lot of times when you're talking, if you say community outreach, we need to go slow down and spend some time to win some trust. It seems like decision makers just look at that as like a soft thing and we're not budgeting for that. And no, we have to speed forward. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of call this stage pre-development. What does that mean exactly? Why do you think it is so underfunded and like gets not enough attention to do that step first?
I'll define it first and then I'll tell you why I think people miss it. So the definition we use at Pre-Collective is it's all that early messy stuff that you have to do to build what you need next instead of putting familiar band-aids on what you already have. So it is not a neatly defined or sequence of activities where you can just check the boxes and work your way through. I think that's what a lot of people wish it were, but that's how you get a better pump, right? That's where you have pre-decided the answer. So it's squishy. Parts of it feel as uncomfortable as Thanksgiving dinner can, and you really have to work those skills and learn that space. But other parts of it can be super rewarding. And I think the reason it gets missed often is because like when you do it well, a lot of this work in water and climate resilience and infrastructure, it looks more like preventative healthcare than it looks like any other kind of work. So when you do it right, you're generally heading off bad outcomes, you're creating better outcomes, but that's way down the line. It's spread out across a lot of people. And so there isn't this way of saying invest up front to avoid all these long-term costs. And that's why at Pre we feel so strongly about you have to show, not tell, so that you can show both the community value and the financial value and make the case for that investment up front. And it's not just the money investment, it's the time. It's the flexibility. It's that nobody does outreach well when they're time famished or like working with time confetti of I have to fit this into this 30-minute Zoom. You have to have that flex. And so it's a discipline in a lot of ways, but I think it doesn't get noticed because when you do it really well, like water professionals will feel this really deeply, right? When you do your work perfectly, nobody notices. It's when something goes wrong, the water main break, that everybody knows that your job exists. And I used to say this half jokingly at EPA, but climate resilience, the year after the storm, everyone applauds your work. The year after that, no one remembers and your budget gets cut. And the year after that, your staff go away. So
Yeah.
I actually think most of my job is two basic things. It's English to English translation across these sectors so you can get folks together. And it's storytelling about that. What is the value you can create? And so I think it all comes back down to that kind of scary point where you meet community, asking a question like, hey, what would it take for you to support this project? Or what would make it more exciting for you or more valuable is really different than what do you think about this design or this plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
And the
eliciting a
difference is,
conversation.
yeah.
Please,
I
what's the
just love,
difference to
I
you?
don't know, I'm smiling so much and like all of these hearing from people like you because it's the things that Rogue talks about. And still, I just think hearing, utilities and the water sector, hearing from an expert, all these other experts saying, hey, there are better ways. And no, just because you're a very smart engineer does not mean you necessarily know how to go and have, this conversation the right way.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, so as someone who has gone through the like engineering
Yeah.
education version of this, the skills I use on the engineering side of the house are figuring out um, how to frame technical challenges really well. So, like, is this worth doing? And what are the alternatives available to us? The skills I use for the early parts of projects are actually a lot more like the Thanksgiving dinner skills, right? It's how would I have a conversation with my grandmother about this in a way that recognizes how smart she was and does not disrespect that without requiring of her the expertise in this specific thing. And that, to me, those are different skills. And I think it's a shame that we don't get taught them more in engineering school. But I also think we got to pick them up because otherwise you are setting yourself up for the opposition where people just move right back in to that space where they were, no matter what you offer them because you didn't
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah. Well, it also feels like it's so much at the root of what it means to build a community is like we're living together in some borders and deciding. And this is kind of the beauty of politics, even when it's crazy, is just that like it is the practice of saying, hey, how do we want to organize ourselves around the resources that are available to us? And I think it's rare that we create the safe space for a conversation to say, hey, we need to hear multiple perspectives, but also zoom back a little bit and say, is there a larger opportunity or problem we're trying to solve? Like, are we like making things that are like we're doing this right now in our city? We're putting a brand new bus line down. It's disrupting tons of traffic. And I drive by and I was like, whoa, this is such a good opportunity where we're replacing all the water mains across the busiest street in our city. And I know our water utility folks are excited about this project. I see it happens in my neighborhood. So it's like very disruptive. And so I'm in those Facebook groups and chats and, where folks are venting, but I'm like, yes, we're also doing it. I think really we're taking advantage of multiple infrastructure projects to do a bunch of stuff all at once. That is like, we're not going to have to do this again in a while. Yeah, that's a little bit of a tangent and just in the thing. I'm like,
I think
that's good planning. And I'm just so excited. I'm like, someone did this right.
But I think it's squarely in it, right, Isaac? It's this, we don't often have the simple message conversations and we don't say the thing that everybody's feeling, which is like, guys, this is going to suck for 2 years. Like, let's be real. It's not going to be any fun. Like, I'm in San Diego and there is a ton of construction around me. And I am like the local infrastructure and housing enthusiast where I'm like, isn't it going to be great in 10 years when we don't have to deal with that or when we are more fire safe because of it? And I think folks get these pain points when, for example, you're trying to fix up your home. We're like, it's going to be like a construction site. You're managing toddlers or whatever it is. And we make that trade-off when we're making the whole decision for ourselves. But we often don't get that dose of perspective or get to hold on to it with the reminders of like, wow, this is going to be like, this does suck. That's very real. I don't have anywhere to park. It takes me 10 minutes longer to get my kids to school. I think some of that is a function of how we're required to do community engagement, which is really broken and leads to bad outcomes. It's kind of the box checking version of it. Doesn't let you do the simple stuff where you get ahead and you're like, you ask the open-ended question. You always feel like you have to present something, and that often closes a door before you can even open it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that makes me nuts is like, and this is more in the context of like, say, an Army Corps project, a really massive coastal protection, has to hook up to a water system. Nobody goes in and tells a community, this is going to be a 10-year process. Every single engagement is treated as its own one-off event. And if you don't know how these things work, you're like, what's next? What am I supposed to put this level of effort in like every 2 months, every 3 months? Like, why have they been silent for a year? That expectation setting is so important, and it's not anywhere in the checklist of what counts. So just thinking about how you would want to be treated and putting yourself in the shoes of a resident of, okay, here are the facts. Like, it's going to suck, but it's going to be better after it's, and I'm going to ask for a lot of your time for about 6 months. And then there's going to be a period where you wonder where I've gone. And it's going to be like a year of radio silence. And then this construction is going to happen. But like that level of basic, I don't see in very many places or engagement opportunities. And I think it's an opportunity missed, right? Like if you talk to any engineer on a project, they know this stuff. They would tell their family. I was like, okay, so here's the deal. The street's being torn up. It's going to be 2 or 3 days because it's this.
Yeah.
But we just don't think about doing it in these more technical contexts. But I think the simple information is undervalued.
It's crazy too, because hearing you kind of recap it and just saying it so simply like that, it's so simple. And, no one's meaning ill will towards not doing it right. There's something called the curse of knowledge. And sometimes when we know things, we forget what it's like to not know them. And so we walk in just kind of assuming everyone like understands a process. So we forget, like our brain doesn't think to break it down. But yeah, some of these things are so simple. I am also curious your thoughts and kind of how Pre-Collective works with trust, like how trust comes into, when you're doing collaboration with a lot of different parties, you said the messy work, it seems like trust is going down everywhere. We talk about all the polls like for government, but it seems like no one trusts anyone. No one trusts data. No one trusts facts. No one. What does that look like in Pre-Collective's work, and how do you approach it or address it? Simple question,
Oh yeah, no, it's the little stuff. I mean, I think we approach it continuously, right? And we hold ourselves to a really high standard of saying what we mean and following through on what we're saying. So we're always trying to underpromise and overdeliver. And we do a ton of that expectation setting along the way, and the course correcting of, hey, this is starting to look different than what we thought it might be, and we might need to adjust. And the other thing I think is we just use really plain language because it's easy to lose trust if you make someone feel dumb.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think I got an incredible education in that from having 2 grandmothers who helped raise me, who are the smartest people in the world. They spoke half a dozen languages, but they were pulled out of school in elementary school. And so they always felt like they wouldn't understand. And so I think one of the things that's helped me stay in that headspace is I try to think about, if you have access to a second language, the best thing you can do is take your technical information and try to say it in your second language. And it is almost impossible unless you are a professional engineer in multiple languages, because I think my favorite example of this was in grad school. I was working on carbon sequestration issues and groundwater contamination. And I was working on the risk and community engagement side. And I went to go visit my grandmother, and she had the courage to ask. She always asked me, "What are you working on?" And she didn't ask other people because she was afraid she wouldn't understand. But she asked, and I was like, "Oh no, I don't have any words for carbon sequestration in my family's native language from South India." So I was like, "Give me a second." And I finally was able to say, "Okay, here are the important pieces." I was like, "Do you remember your coal stove when you were young?" She was like, "Yeah." It's like, how did it feel when you had that thing going? She was like, "Oh, it was smoky." I was like, "Okay, so work with me for a second. I want you to imagine getting a bucket and catching that smoke." And she was like, "All right." And I was like, "So you've got the bucket with the smoke." I was like, "Walk outside. If you could dig a hole anywhere in the ground and put that in the ground, where would you put it?" And her first answer was, "Well, not near the well." And I said, "That's what I'm working on."
Mm.
It's
And
so
she was
cool.
off to the races. Like, she called one of my great aunts. They had a 3-hour conversation. They left feeling like experts in carbon sequestration. And then they were like, "You got to do something about this. Like, you can't go
Yeah.
into the well."
Oh,
That is the core
Chills
of it.
like that. I literally have chills because imagine if we could all do something like that and talk like a normal person and connect with people like that, the passion they would have and the 3-hour conversations they would have and the
mhm.
impact the world would have and be better. And that's why, the skill set matters.
And they will share the work so you don't have to. Your
Yep.
upfront time invested. Like, I didn't have to teach my great aunt about carbon sequestration. She called me a month later and was like, "So listen, I've been thinking."
Mm.
But you create your own support network when you do that
Yeah.
little early bit well. And it's so hard. And you're not
Yeah.
going to get it right every time. And you're not going to get it right with everyone.
Mhm.
But the key is just that the giving it a go is something we
Mhm.
lose in our careers as we get more expert. And I think
Mhm.
taking ourselves back to that, how would I explain it to a kid? How would I explain it to
Mhm.
a grandparent? How would I explain this to someone in my neighborhood who is expert in something else?
Mhm.
And just reminding everybody that someone else is expert in something else, and they don't need to become an expert in what you do. You are
Yep.
that. You get to hold that for them. What you need to do
Mhm.
is meet them with what they need to know to feel safe and confident that you respect them.
Mm.
And that's where I
Mic
think
drop.
the good heartedness of water people, like, we're working on stuff that is essential for everyone's life.
Mhm.
Like, these are not optional systems or services or outcomes. And
Mhm.
so this is doable. This is not,
Yeah.
you've done the hard stuff. You've become a water expert. Now you need
Mhm.
to become a neighbor and a grandkid and
Yeah.
a parent and
Mm.
be able to switch hats at the right moments.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of like that aspect um of just as you grow up in general, sometimes, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I need to remember what it's like to be a kid and just to know that I was like curious and also not like more uninhibited and just yeah, like could just lean in, and that like the more knowledge you get, then sometimes the more sometimes that can come with more anxiety of like, am I saying it right? Am I doing it right? But if, like you
Totally.
said, like if you give it a go, like a lot of times people will be like, I, I see the authenticity and like, okay, like we can work because there's like, yeah, it's when we bottle up and say, you're, well, what are you hiding? Like, I feel like you're not saying something. And yeah.
Or the pressure of needing to give a right answer. I think one of the things that is underappreciated is, like, asking a question rarely gets you into the papers for saying something. Like, asking a question and waiting for an answer, whereas the pressure to give the answer to someone that's a different thing. And I think a lot of times as we get further into our careers, the expectation is that we're there to give an answer. And we're not. We're there. That is nobody's job to give answers. The job in infrastructure in any sector is to make people's lives better.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like, that's it. And if you can hang on to that with both hands and like shake yourself loose when you want to answer a question, it's, I think it's protective, because this plain language stuff, it's not the stuff that gets into newspapers. It's not the stuff that's going to get you in trouble. Just asking someone like, hey, what would it take for you to support this project? Like, what would it take to make it suck less to have all this construction for 2 years? That's not going to get you into trouble. And I think so often the fear comes around getting the wrong answer, but there are very few wrong questions. And so there's actually a safety in it that I want to really encourage folks to lean into. Like, I promise you, I live at the edge of all of my expertise every single day. And it's a way to just reduce the pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
This is so good, Shalini. Yeah.
Yeah. I know some of my takeaways.
I feel like we're giving so much. I'm almost scared that we're giving so much away. And to get the good stuff, you need to come to Catalyst. Like,
there's plenty more behind this.
Yeah, I know. I'm like there's a lot.
No,
more.
I think we're just scraping the surface. So too, like, if people are listening, obviously we'll talk about Catalyst and coming to Catalyst. If, they're like, I want to learn more about Pre-Collective, how you guys can work together, how, they're just interested in your work, where would they find some of it?
Oh, come find us online, please. We are at precollective.org on the web, and our whole team is on LinkedIn and very active. So come say hello. We love when people come to us with questions, like that early stage stuff. And I think one of my wish lists for people in the water sector is that I hope we can use these skills to get better RFPs so that we get more Hobokens and fewer I'm buying.
Yeah. Oh, that's good use. Well, yeah, so good. And I hope someone's takeaway too is that relieve the pressure on yourself. We can ask questions, right? We don't have to come in and just inform. I think the scary part of public meetings sometimes, or community engagement, is we don't have the answer. So we just want to skip the step. So I like how you relieved us of that. And yeah, like Isaac said, if our listeners are hearing this before September of 2026, we hope to see you in San Diego. Shalini is going to be there, doing some great interaction, guiding us through a session, guiding us through this work. And you can find that online. There'll be links in this podcast video and wherever you're finding that. So, and if not, we hope to see you at Future Catalyst. We bring people like Shalini and experts we can learn from every single year. So thanks so much this was just so good today. Thanks for joining us.
I can't believe this is my job. I love it.
Same.
Yeah. No, thank you. And again, to our listeners, we're very excited that we get to kind of pull back the curtain just a little bit on what the experience is like at Catalyst. And so be sure to follow all of those things. Reach out, let us know who you're enjoying hearing from, and if there's anyone else that you're like, wow, they've got a great story of how they make water work. I love hearing that too. And so can't wait to see you next week.